I made a video a while back on the best practices for lane splitting, assuming you're the type of person that does that sort of thing.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
Now that video was more of a, if you're gonna do it, here are some ways to do it safely. Because here in America, it's illegal in almost all places, and I wasn't ready to battle it out in the comments section with people who felt like it was irresponsible of me to give advice for doing something that's illegal. But today, as you may have figured out, I'm coming out swinging. I'm gonna explain why lane splitting and all the similar behaviors of filtering and shoulder riding, everything in that vein, should not only be legal, but why being against it is a fundamentally flawed position. Welcome to SquidTips. I'm Alex, aka Budget Tom Hardy. I kind of see it. More Mad Max, less Bane. There is a major flaw in most of the arguments I've seen on both sides of the lane splitting debate, in that they're structured around just a few studies and statistics that don't actually draw any concrete conclusions about the safety of lane splitting. So what we actually need to do is throw out all of these studies and discuss the philosophical differences in perspective that are at the actual nucleus of this conflict. To do that, I think I need to look the part of a philosopher. Otherwise, who's going to take me seriously?
Wait, how do I, oh, okay. Velcro.
Huh. Now people will take me seriously.
To split or not to split? That is the question. In my assessment, the philosophical roots of the lane splitting disagreement are buried in some specific questions. What does it mean when people say that they believe that lane splitting is dangerous? What is danger? And should we allow dangerous things in society? And the biggest one of all, is lane splitting fair? This is what we'll discuss today, using a minimum of boring statistics and data. I'll be appealing to your logos, your critical thinking, your rational mind, you, the galaxy brain viewer. Now.
We have to clearly define terms each step of the way to prevent confusion and avoid the normal result of lane splitting disagreement, talking past each other. I'm going to largely use the term dangerous in the way that the dictionary defines it. If something is dangerous, then it can increase harm. I emphasize can or may, as it does not mean that it will inevitably lead to harm, only a possible outcome of a dangerous action. In the context of motorcycles, we mostly define a dangerous action as something that either increases the likelihood of causing an accident or something that increases the level of harm if an accident were to occur. We all have to agree right here that riding a motorcycle is more dangerous than driving a car or truck. And where does this idea that motorcycles are inherently dangerous come from? Well, it's not that motorcyclists tend to have more sex and so are more likely to get STDs that lead to premature death, although that's probably true too. I make this assessment based on the simple metric of fatality rates per mile driven in the United States, where accidents on a motorcycle are nearly 30 times more fatal. I use this statistic as a proxy for danger because it's really the only metric available due to the lack of uniformity in how traffic accidents are recorded, because not all states and countries record every accident without a fatality. Not to mention that people may not report an accident for a variety of reasons. Now, this isn't to say that motorcycles get in the same number of accidents as cars. It's possible that motorcycles are involved in less or more accidents per mile driven than cars. But that's another conclusion that cannot be made with empirical data at this time. So we hopefully agree now that motorcycles are inherently dangerous in comparison to driving cars. But motorcycles aren't illegal. You can drive them in every state and country I've ever heard of as long as you have a valid license. Although danger could be a reason why we might forbid somebody from doing an action, it's generally insufficient to make something illegal based solely on the fact it may be dangerous. I'm in America, so I'm going to make some American-centric statements here. We allow people to own guns, in spite of the fact that they cause demonstrable harm to thousands of people in our population each year. We let people eat fast food and drink alcohol, even though it provably damages their health and can lead to greater burden on society through the healthcare system. We let people skydive, bungee jump, take their cars to the track and drive them at speeds far exceeding speed limits. Now, maybe you would argue against some of these things on a case-by-case basis. There are valid arguments to be had around most of these topics. Maybe you think we should repeal the Second Amendment and dramatically increase gun restrictions. Maybe you you would shut down every McDonald's, Taco Hell, and Jack Off in the Box and open up farm-to-table vegan restaurants serving chickpeas in 200 different forms. You might think adding alcohol to a forbidden substances list, along with anything else that could cause harm to our bodies if ingested, is a good idea, even though all we want to do is just chill at home and eat snack foods while watching Aqua Teen Hunger Force for the 400th time, and that doesn't affect you, asshole.
Try this on for size, Fryman. Or for 59 cents more, try the super size.
But if you would argue for all of these, that puts you pretty far outside the target audience of this discussion. And I'd also ask you to point me to a successful society that restricts the population's freedoms in this way, because no first world country that exists today has this level of Spartan authoritarianism. For everyone else, we can agree that there's utility in some things that are inherently dangerous. Putting it in another way, if you're not familiar with those terms, we all willingly choose to do things that have a dangerous component because we receive value in the terms of pleasure or satisfaction from that thing that we believe is worth the risk. Now, we've established that just because something is dangerous or increases danger, that it is not enough to forbid it in our societies. Instead, there's a somewhat subjective standard, weighing the amount of danger versus the utility. It's this subjective bar of potential harm where most of the fighting's done, in the form of anecdotes on both sides.
I think we should know what is going on the ground.
Sure, but the way
Data is the plural of anecdote. I think we need to know what is...
No, it's not. It's absolutely not.
If you heard anything so fucking stupid. From a philosophical sense, there's a moment where something becomes too dangerous to be allowed, where the potential cost and risk overcomes the utility of allowing an action. That precise moment can be challenging to define with some actions like lane splitting, but let me now try to convince you of the very specific point that lane splitting doesn't have a fixed amount of danger inherent to it, and the reduction in utility by making it illegal is an overreaction to behaviors that are completely disconnected from lane splitting. Let's imagine a hypothetical scenario that is not uncommon in large cities: a motorcycle riding in stopped highway traffic, where space between lanes is large enough to fit a motorcycle, say 6 feet or so. If a motorcyclist were to dismount from their bike and begin to walk their motorcycle between cars, slowly getting farther and farther ahead, would you really say that this action is creating a significant danger to the rider or the people around them? Although we can probably imagine some situations where somebody might be surprised to see a rider walking next to them and feel some shock, or maybe a driver changing lanes and not seeing them and slowly bumping into the rider. I would hope that most people watching this agree that this is not an exceedingly dangerous action. Now, let's take the same situation, except shrink the lanes a bit so that it's not quite as easy to get between cars, maybe 4 feet, and the motorcycle is traveling at 150 miles an hour. I think we can now agree that we have increased the potential danger, not just that an accident is more probable to occur due to the rider and cars around them having less time to react to each other from the differences in speed. There's a visualization called the Solomon curve I discussed in my previous video about lane splitting if you want to dig more into that, but also the amount of harm that would be created if a collision occurred in this situation would be significantly higher. I would hope that even a die-hard lane splitting advocate would acknowledge that we've now increased the danger significantly and have exceeded the utility value of that action. But the point that this hypothetical illustrates is that lane splitting in and of itself is not an exceedingly dangerous action. So to summarize, we don't forbid every action that's dangerous or increases danger. We all willingly take actions that provide us utility while increasing risk or danger. Lane splitting in and of itself is not an exceedingly dangerous action, but there are additional behaviors that can create the condition where lane splitting is an overly dangerous action. Next, let's discuss lane splitting from the lens of fairness, or to use a term from philosophy, is it just or unjust? Plato, Confucius, Aquinas, Descartes, Kant, with your powers combined, I'm just some dude trying to convince people to let me get home faster.
Oh, God damn it! I don't care if you're old, seize the gap!
I can't know how familiar each individual viewer is with the concept of fairness or justice, so let me just establish that the concept of what is fair or just has no universal definition. Socrates, Buddha, John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Ali, and many other philosophers have defined and debated justice in their own nuanced way, and I am absolutely not equipped to tell anyone what justice should be for them as an individual. So instead, I'm going to lay out a definition here that I'm going to build upon, and then if you want, you can try to argue against it in order to refute the conclusions that I'm going to make. We all require transportation for our own reasons, both professionally and for pleasure, and since the lazy scientists out there haven't invented a teleporter yet, motor vehicles are a popular and common means for getting these meat sacks we live in from place to place, both as an individual and collectively in the form of buses, trains, ships, and airplanes. The vehicle you choose to get you around varies greatly, largely because each of us has highly unique priorities in how we choose our method of transportation. In large cities like Seattle, many people live without owning their own car, instead relying entirely on public buses to get around. For these people, cost savings is often cited as a reason, as the bus passes are cheap. Cars require a significant upfront investment of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, and also require constant inputs of money in the form of gas, maintenance, repairs, and insurance. The trade-off is that there are also downsides to buses in that they run on schedules that we don't control, and they get us places slower than we could with our own vehicle. The trade-off is the autonomy that driving their own car would provide. Is it unfair that some people don't have the resources to own their own vehicle? Some people have the advantage of living near the light rail that travels from one end of Seattle to the other. Rail systems are generally more consistent than buses due to not having to deal with traffic. They're mostly unaffected by weather and rarely experience maintenance issues while active. Is it unfair that some people are able to afford homes near rail stations, or that cities prioritize where rail systems travel, excluding some people in the populace? Many people can commute in their own car daily, or even use their cars to provide pleasure in the form of taking them to recreational activities in the area or even hundreds of miles away. On top of the advantages I've mentioned in relation to public transit, there's an additional cost to all of us in the form of environment-harming emissions when you use your own car, as well as the danger that someone operating a several thousand-pound vehicle can inflict on others if they cause an accident. Is it fair that those with more money than others can forego public transit and cause harm to our environment, spend less time commuting, and have more recreational options than those without those resources? Motorcycles have a variety of utility advantages that make them some people's preferred method of commuting. They have cost advantages, not only costing less up front, but less over time as they get better gas mileage than many vehicles on the road, which also has the benefit of making them more environment friendly and having lower overall cost in repairs and upkeep. Motorcycle size also attributes to a number of advantages for the rider and others, especially in urban areas. They're easier to fit in parking areas, and many motorcycles can fit in the same space as a car does. A person commuting alone takes up much less space on the road when driving a motorcycle than a car or truck. Many large cities incentivize motorcycle usage by allowing them to utilize special commuter or toll lanes as a way of reducing overall traffic. Given these advantages of motorcycles to the individual and society, I think the reasonable question to ask is not why we would allow motorcycles to do something cars can't, but why do we allow people to commute in cars and trucks when better alternatives exist? Is it fair that we allow people to unnecessarily clog the roads when driving alone in a car? Is it just that some people are allowed to get behind the wheel of a 2-ton vehicle and put others at potentially greater risk of harm from the driver's poor judgment? This returns us back to the discussion of danger and individual choice. We've established that there are trade-offs to any form of transportation. Motorcycles are more dangerous. They directly expose you to the elements and require additional skills tests to operate. But as a society, we seem to have made the decision that it's okay for people to choose a safer, simpler, but less efficient and more environmentally harmful transportation method, regardless of the fairness to others. Why? Well, it's a good question. I don't even necessarily know if it was a decision that was made consciously, or if it was just kind of how laws evolved over time. What I think we can safely say is that each of us have a widely varying comfort level with risk, and I don't want to force someone into an uncomfortable position where they feel like they may lose their life whenever they drive to their job by doing something like maybe forcing people to commute on a motorcycle unless they have a specific reason. I know many people who wouldn't want the discomfort of driving in inclement weather on a motorcycle or limiting their ability to carry personal belongings or passengers when they commute daily. I think it's also fine that some people drive older, less fuel-efficient vehicles because they want the autonomy of not taking public transit, but maybe they can't afford newer, better vehicles. My key point to all of this is that there really is no fairness in how people get from one place to another. We allow people to choose their preferred method based on their own values, privileges, and what advantages they prioritize. Lane splitting is just another advantage motorcycles have that is intrinsic to their nature and is counterbalanced by their costs to the rider in skill requirements, environmental exposure, and safety. What is really unfair, given those costs, is to deny a motorcycle the ability to efficiently utilize the roads to split or filter simply because cars or trucks cannot. If you still disagree at this point, it's probably because we don't agree on some low-level value about individual freedom or government control in people's lives. And well, we're probably just gonna have to disagree. Or maybe you're just an asshole. Here's my prescription for how to migrate from a baby brain society that has artificially prevented motorcyclists from efficiently utilizing the roads to a galaxy brain utopia that has unlocked the full potential of those who bravely make the two-wheeled sacrifice. While we should legalize splitting and filtering, we should impose laws that prevent high-speed differentials between motorcycles and surrounding traffic, as both the Solomon Curve, Hurt Report, and Berkeley study concluded that there was a significant correlation between speed differential and accident severity. Here's the specifics I would instate as part of legalizing lane splitting that incorporate the lessons of the most up-to-date research and studies on motorcycle safety. Splitting and filtering can only be done with same direction traffic. Having opposite direction traffic on one or both sides of a motorcycle should be forbidden. We could start by allowing it to be done within slow or stop traffic, so traffic traveling maybe no faster than 25 miles an hour. Motorcycles should not travel more than 15 miles an hour faster than surrounding traffic. It should be allowed on any street and highway, save for maybe some cases where road conditions are objectively dangerous to motorcycles, such as high amounts of gravel or rough pre-paved conditions in construction zones. These are pretty simple restrictions and would limit the types of situations that lead to significant danger when lane splitting. What behaviors are required from other drivers with these new motorcycle capabilities? Well, you gotta use your mirrors and blind spot check before checking lanes. And actually, that's actually it. That's all that's needed. You're doing that, right? Like, this is a thing that you already do? Really, all that's asked from a car driver is that you obey the rules of the road that have existed and have been taught for decades. Be generally aware of your surroundings, use your turn signals, and confirm there's open space before turning or changing lanes. Don't drive distracted or impaired. The rest is up to us, the motorcycle riders. Looking even more holistically, we should, regardless of whether or not we legalize lane splitting, revamp our drivers' education systems. I believe the Motorcycle Safety Foundation is a great organization, but their lack of support for teaching riders about safe lane splitting, under the guise of not wanting to encourage it, is a gross disservice to the community. This should be remedied immediately, in every state. Abstinence-only education does not fucking work. Regular driver's ed doesn't emphasize enough being aware of the risks motorcyclists face, and so fails educating the populace on how much more of a risk they are to motorcyclists. We should also be tackling these unfairness arguments and encourage people to consider motorcyclists or scooters to further normalize motorcycle riding in an effort to improve carbon emissions and reduce overall traffic congestion. Hopefully these prescriptions not only feel reasonable, but inevitable. That we'll get to the point where we embrace and appreciate the differences in how we each choose to live our lives, in a collective effort to get everyone safely and efficiently to wherever your road is leading you.
For successfully completing this sermon, I now anoint you as a champion of lane splitting in the Order of the Sacred Squid, a movement that I created. I can't call it a religion yet because I haven't filed the paperwork. Yet. So go forth, spread the gospel, use the rhetoric that I provided you, or, just share this video if you can't remember all of that. I don't blame you, it took me a year to write this. We need all of us to bring others into the light and to cast aside their judgmental and barbaric ways of blocking us when we're just trying to get home in rush hour traffic, like everybody else. If you enjoyed this video, you might be as broken inside as I am, and you should probably see a therapist. But also, you should like and subscribe so that YouTube jams up all your recommendations with my videos. I also ask you to consider a small tithe to my Patreon, as I run this channel on a not-for-profit basis, because I reinvest all the money earned into the quality of the production. If you've seen my earlier work, you might notice subtle differences. Before, after. This getup was $80. Probably not well spent because I'm guessing a lot of people literally shut this video off as soon as I put it on. Also, you should check out some side action I've been up to, especially if you like my accident analysis series on a channel called Best Dashcam Accidents that I've been collaborating with here and there, for funsies. As always, ride fast and take chances.
Congratulations to Utah for passing a filtering bill recently. Damn, when did Utah get so cool? Although, this is one of the most milquetoast ways to legalize something. Basically, motorcycles can filter up to the front of traffic lights. And that's it. They can't do it if the speed on the road is over 45 miles an hour. You need at least 2 lanes on the road, so you can't shoulder ride to the front. The vehicles surrounding have to be completely stopped. The motorcycle can't split at more than 15 miles an hour, and it has to be made safely. Whatever the hell that means. But you know what? What's that meme again? It's something.